Alaska Airlines requires an SDS agent at gate C.
And I am sending a signal message to Sean Dempsey. I had also suggested to New Hampshire that they may wish to name an alternate. Okay, Mr. Secretary, if you think we have quorum, I'm going to call the meeting to order.
Okay, I'm going to mark that. It is now 9:03, right?
Okay, I'm calling the meeting to order then at 9:03 Eastern. And Mr. Secretary, if you would call the roll.
Yes. All right. We may have to double check whether or not I can. If you can, Madam Chair, enable the share screen.
Oh,
And I'll
yes,
just-
one moment,
I'll do a roll
please.
call in the background while you're doing that. All right, Gary Alvestead, California. Not seeing or hearing. Mark Raymond is here. Ted Brown is not here. Joe Brunhart, I don't see. Josh Chappell from New Mexico. Nope. Matt Choco, I see.
If you are traveling to Austin, Texas, this is again a gate change announcement. Flight 1852 nonstop service to
Madam
Austin,
Chair, could you,
Texas, will depart from gate C30.
thank you. There's Mr. Alvestead. I'm gonna remark that. Just in time, Gary. Okay, Sean Dempsey not present at the moment. Ken Matz is here. Joshua McHose is here. Tim McMaster, I don't see. Dustin Nana, I don't see. Omar Ricoro is present. Mike Seebeck is present. Ashley Shade, I do not see. Nope. Mary Swim. Nope. Curry Taylor is present. I see him. John Thompson is here. And Ms. Harlos is here. That gives us 10 primaries, and we'll go through the alternates very quickly. Mr. Casciato is here from Colorado. I don't see Mr. Caroli. Carolyn Cliff. I see Luke Enzer from Pennsylvania. Paul Grindle's not here. Sean Hickman. Janae LeBlanc is here. Chris Lucchini, I don't see. Daniel Miller. Rachel Nix. Starchild. Not seeing. All right, and the last ones are Kat Martin, Caleb Newbill, and Tim Yo. I do not see any of them present. So, Madam Chair, going by what we have here, 10 primaries are present plus 2 alternates that would sit. The 2 alternates are Luke from Pennsylvania and Janae from Texas. So that will give us 12 total votes right now.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Secretary. Now we are at opportunity for public comment. If there's any non-committee members that would like to address the committee, please raise your hand. You can find the hand raise function along the bottom of your Zoom screen under reactions. But if for some reason you can't find it, just politely interrupt and I'll get you in line. Otherwise, I'm going to be silent for a moment and see if anyone raises their hand. Okay, seeing none, if there is no objection from the committee, I'm going to continue the practice we have been doing of deferring all minutes approval to the email list. The standing instructions I have given the secretary is that to give them a week for commentary after posting, after which he can start an email ballot sponsored by myself. If there's no objection, I'm going to continue that practice with any outstanding minutes for this meeting. One thing I did not have on the agenda, but I hope that the committee will indulge me, I'm glad the secretary reminded me of this, is I am proposing, this isn't any kind of motion, but because unless someone from the committee moves this, I really cannot stop the committee from adding any proposals up through pretty much the moment I walk on stage to propose our report. But if we want to have the best chance of things passing, it's always good to get them in the survey. The survey is going to be going out the second week in April. Our next town hall, I believe, is April 9th. So I am suggesting highly, again, it's not any kind of order, a soft deadline of the meeting in the first week of April to have all of our proposals done. At any event, that will be the last time to have them done in order to get them in the survey and have good member data. All right, with that announcement being said, I would like to just get right into where we left off. So if the secretary could pull up on the screen, where we were at is continuation of consideration of amendment of plank 3.7 self-determination. This is where procedurally we had left off. We had a primary motion, which was to add sentence. We recognize the right to political secession without having to obtain the permission of others. By the way, I am wearing my Flex It or Die shirt in honor of the secession plank. And then there was a proposed substitute motion by Joe Brungart, and that was already properly moved. So it doesn't matter that he is not present. It is still a live motion. And his substitute was instead to alter the entire plank. And it's up on the screen, but you can see he wanted to add the words alter, abolish, or withdraw from it, and also or none, so that the entire plank would read, whenever any form of government becomes destructive of individual liberty, it is the right of the people to alter, abolish, or withdraw from it, and to agree to such new governance or none as to them shall seem most likely to protect their liberty. I did put a chair's note in the agenda that says, if we do pass the substitute, we will be faced with some competing proposals in part because we had previously amended this plank. Again, it can be separate proposals. We can have competing proposals. We'll deal with this problem if we do pass the substitute. I just wanted the committee to be aware that that would be a situation that we would face if we pass the substitute. And also Mr. Brungart or another member may wish to submit part or all of the substitute if it doesn't pass as a minority report as well. That is always an option. All right, so what we are on first is debate or amendment of the primary motion, which was to add that last sentence. I have Mr. Taylor and then Mr. Cholko. Mr. Taylor.
Yes, Madam Chair, I would like an opportunity to perfect that language, and I have written about this in the email list, and I'm going to dump in the amendment that I would like to change it to. It's similar to what's already there, but I think it corrects some of the grammatical issues. Number one, in which you can argue that the without is acting on the, I think is this a different language that's being up there that's shown on the screen? Now I'm a little confused. I thought there was a without in that sentence, but nevertheless, I'll go ahead and argue.
One moment, Mr. Taylor. I do believe the secretary has the wrong language. Where we had ended up is the language that's in the agenda. We recognize the right to political secession without having to obtain the permission of others. That is the last passed language as the primary.
I'm not sure why I thought that was it, but okay.
I thought that this language on the screen, so I don't want to derail things here, but when I was looking at live notes and at the agenda, I thought that stuff was wrong and that what the chair just put up here was right. I mean, what the secretary just had on the screen here was right. So
I know I re-listened to the entire meeting and Mr. Brown did, I believe it was he who moved the combination of that into one sentence saying that was much cleaner. That was one of the last motions passed.
So item number, oh, well, I mean, I'll take your word for it. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, you had it on the screen there for a second, Mr. Secretary.
All right. I will, it's very simple to Control V.
Okay, just want to make sure everyone sees what Mr. Taylor is amending, then I'll get right back to Mr. Taylor.
No, hold on. Let me get rid of that. And
Federal regulation requires all individuals over the age of 2 to wear face masks.
So I just want to confirm something, that when we were dealing with this last time, there was a primary and a substitute that I think was either proposed or amended by me, that I then think amended further to put in the word secession. And I thought that that ended up as the primary. Did it not? Did that fail?
That
that's what I
one,
thought too, Matt.
no, it failed and we ended up back at the primary as we now see it on the screen. And the last motion made was Mr. Brungart proposing a new substitute. And he said, don't kill me.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and start over. I'm speaking to a motion to amend what is shown now on the screen with the main motion. And it's just some, there's a couple of things that it fixes. Number one, there is a without clause, and that clause could be argued to affect the recognize instead of the right, if you want to be grammatically correct. So I just reworded the sentence in order to be able to avoid that problem. The second thing is, I also don't think that we mean the permission of no other people. Whenever people are talking about secession, they usually secede in a group of people. So at least you need the group of, friends that you want to secede with to be part of the people that you're going to concede to secede with. And so it also fixes that problem by saying, we recognize the right to political secession, a right which requires the permission of no currently established political entity.
Okay, Mr. Taylor, would you like to speak to that further?
No, I think that's enough. Thanks.
Okay, I have Mr. Cholko. We're now on the amendment and I will be after Mr. Cholko.
No, sorry, I can't remember what I wanted to say, so I took it down.
Okay, Mr. Taylor, one thing I would argue, I do understand having to obtain the permission of the others you wish to secede with. I think that's an excellent point. But I think one thing that the committee may wish to consider is your language seems to foreclose the original, I'm not wording this very gracefully, I apologize. The original language seems to implicitly recognize the right of secession down to the individual, so that one person might not be seceding with a group of other people. And the other seems to imply going from one political entity into another political entity. Perhaps that is just me, it's just commentary I wish to make. Would anyone else like to speak to Mr. Taylor's amendment?
Madam Chair,
I have Mr. Cholko, then Starchild, and then Mr. Seebeck.
Okay, so I agree, I think on a technical level that it, yeah, you have to have the permission of whatever new political entity you're joining or establishing, if you're joining or establishing one. But just like the chair just said, I feel like this kind of, I feel like this is sort of a limitation on the right to secession. But probably more importantly, I think I don't want to say confusing, but it's just not as clear and obvious as to what we're talking about. And I don't think it's necessary to make this change. I think it hurts the plank on net rather than helps it. So I think I'm opposed to the amendment.
Point of information.
Yes, Starchild.
The amendment being discussed, Matt, that you're speaking to is just adding that sentence, we recognize the right to political secession.
That's what I was speaking to.
Okay.
Yeah, but he.
Oh,
he
the bottom
struck-
one.
The bottom one, he
Yeah.
struck without having to obtain the permission of others and instead inserted dash a right which requires the permission of no currently established political entity.
Okay, so it's substituting the language in the third paragraph on the screen for the language in the first paragraph?
It's amending it, yes.
Okay, amending. Let me pass if you would come back to me. I would think about that a little bit more.
Mr. Seebeck?
Yeah, I just put up Colorado's plank in the chat. The problem with the amendment here, which I believe is to the original, am I correct on that? Mr. Taylor's amendment, is that correct?
Right, we are speaking only to Mr. Taylor's amendment of the primary.
Okay, thank you. I had some technical problems. I was a little confused. The problem with it is this: secession is more, can be more than just political secession. There can be personal secession too. You know, you can walk away from any relationship you want, whether it's political, financial, or personal. And I think that's a broader aspect of the idea of self-determination rather than just a political side of it. So I don't like the idea of political secession in here. The idea of the permission of no currently established political entity, I think I addressed this a little bit in the email over the course of the week. But I think if we just say we recognize the right to secession without political, and then we and look at adding something like what the Colorado plank has in the play about the necessary obligations not violate the right of others, I think we get a much stronger plank out of it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Seebeck. Mr. Taylor?
Okay, I'm going to respond to that. We're a political party. When we make statements in our platform about the issues, people want to know where we stand politically. They do not want to know what our personal feelings are about certain particular topics. We don't need to talk about personal life choices. That's obvious. You should be able to say what you want outside of, you know, the part of the issue of the platform that's already said. What is the essence of the political nature of what we're trying to say? That's the key thing. It doesn't matter what the broader term of secession is outside of politics. That's irrelevant. And I also wanted to address something that the chair said a little bit. A quote from Ayn Rand used to say, you know, what happens with a man on a desert island? Is politics even defined on a desert island? And I think the answer was no, because there were no other people involved. So if there's just one person that's trying to secede, there is no need for politics at all, because you have no one to argue with you. So that's what I would say in response to those two things.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I'd like to answer the point of information in the chat. That is correct. We cannot amend the amendment because there's already a substitute. And just as a bit of levity to Mr. Taylor, if you think one person cannot argue with themselves, I think you need to talk to more libertarians. We argue with ourselves. I argue with myself constantly, but maybe that's just me. Starchild and then Mr. Seebeck.
Yeah, looking at two and thinking about it here, I think I still like Curry's language better, although I would like to drop the word political, and I understand we can't make that change right now, as the chair just stated, but I would suggest we pass that language and then try to drop the word political, which I think is unnecessary, and it sort of implies that we don't support personal secession. But I think it's you know, Chris points about the awkwardness of the without clause and the language in the first paragraph are well taken. I feel like that language is a lot less clear than the language that he's proposed. And I think secession, the word in which most people are thinking about it, is political. And I think it's good to be clear that it doesn't require the permission of currently established political entities. I think that's a useful clarification in this case. So I would urge people to support that change. I don't think it limits our overall right to, support of the right to secession. But I do think getting rid of the word political would help make clear that we're not limiting that.
Thank you, Star Child. Mr. Seebeck?
On the contrary to Mr. Taylor, my mother seceded the rest of the family from my father. That was both a personal decision and a legal decision, and part of politics is dealing with law.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Seebeck. Would anyone else like to speak to this amendment of Mr. Taylor?
Madam Chair, Zoma?
Yes, Mr. Secretary.
I just wanted to double check. We do want these dashes inside the text here.
Well, it would be a M dash, which it doesn't look like your program is doing, but it would be a long dash. That is the way it was proposed by Mr. Taylor.
The keyboard, you can do a dash and hold down the option key, but I'm on a Mac. I don't know if you can do that or not to create the long dash on your keyboard.
No, it's not me, it's Google.
Well,
anyway.
in the markup, I'll be able to do a proper
Yeah.
M dash, but that is how it was proposed by Mr. Taylor.
Okay.
All right, seeing no further debate, Mr. Secretary, if you could take a roll call vote. What we are voting on is passing the amendment, which would strike without having to obtain the permission of others, and instead insert dash, a right which requires the permission of no currently established political entity.
All righty. There we go. Gary Alstead,
Nay.
Mark Raymond,
Abstain.
Janae LeBlanc,
Nay.
Matt Choco,
Pass me, please.
no problem. Ken Matz,
Aye.
Josh McHose,
Aye.
Luke Enzer,
Pass me as well.
alrighty. Omar Ricor will vote aye. Mike Seebeck,
Beg pardon, we're voting on what again?
We are voting on Mr. Taylor's amendment, which would strike without having to obtain the permission of others, and insert dash, a right which requires the permission of no currently established political entity.
Okay, no.
Star Child,
Yes.
Curry Taylor,
Aye.
John Thompson.
Aye.
Okay, now we missed a few people, so we're gonna come back. All right, to Matt Choco.
I'll abstain.
I'll come back over here so everybody can see where we're at. Matt Choco abstains. And Luke Enzer.
I think adding dashes makes it a little clunky, so I'd say nay, but I don't think it'll matter.
Okay. It's your vote. All right. So did I miss anyone? Did I miss anyone? Because I know I got Star Child here now. If I didn't miss anyone, Madam Chair, I show 6 in favor, 4 opposed, 2 express abstentions.
Okay, Mr. Taylor's amendment passes. So we are now back to the primary as amended. It is open to further amendments, since some people had expressed an interest in amending further. I have Star Child.
Yes, Madam Chair. And just as a point of order, did the secretary get your vote for the last vote?
I do not vote unless it's to cause or unless
Okay.
it's, yeah, that's a personal choice. I believe the committee chair should preserve impartiality above
Okay.
all.
I just didn't hear anybody say anything. I would like to propose amending to drop the word political before secession.
Would you like to speak to that amendment? And from what I understand, the word political you are looking to strike is before the word secession, not before the word entity.
Correct.
Okay. If you can speak-
Yeah, I think Curry posted the dictionary definition of the word secession in the chat. I think it is understood to be political. I mean, we can sort of speak colloquially about someone seceding from a family or something like that, but that's that's really not the way that most people understand the term. I think most people do understand it to be political. And while we want to leave the door open to those other kinds of withdrawals from arrangements, I think saying that we recognize the right to political secession would undermine that and make it sound like possibly we don't recognize those other kinds of secession, but only political secession. So for a couple different reasons there, clarity as well as redundancy, I think the word political should be dropped there.
Thank you, Star Child. Mr. Seebeck.
Just to clarify for Star Child, you want it stricken out of both places?
No.
Just
No.
the first one?
Yes.
Are you sure? 'Cause it undermines your point.
One moment. Star Child was very clear. If you'd like to argue for further amendment later, Mr. Seebeck, but we need to avoid crosstalk. So if you would make your debate point, and then we could go back to Star Child.
I'm not sure he made the point clear, and I'm seeking clarification on the amendment.
Yeah, I was speaking of the term, excuse me, there's an emergency vehicle going by here. Just close the window. The political I want to drop was only before secession, not for entity. I could see arguments for changing the second one, but since we already have that language, I mean, I might have just said a right which requires the permission of no existing government, but I think it's more important just to drop the word political before secession at this point. If others want to make other changes, I'm open to that.
Okay, Mr. Seebeck.
I think that's clear, but I'm going to argue against it because I don't think it covers both bases like it should. We can't sit here and say we recognize the right to secession in a broad sense, and then specifically cut it down to say that we don't need permission from the political aspects, but not the rest of them. I think that's missing a piece of it.
Thank you. Would anyone else like Mr. Taylor?
Yeah, in the interest of trying to get this language overall more favorable to everyone, I'm going to vote for this. However, I don't think I could vote for removing the second political. I don't think it would make sense then as language. So I'll support this one since I think it can cover some of the other prior mentioned concerns, but that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Would anyone else like to speak to this amendment? Is there any objection to this amendment?
Objection.
Okay, Mr. Secretary, when you have it prepared, let's do a roll call vote. To be clear, what we are voting on is striking the word political from the word secession so that the sentence would read, we recognize the right to secession, dash, a right which requires the permission of no currently established political entity. Whenever you are ready, Mr. Secretary.
Yes, Madam Chair. All right. Gary Alvstead.
Aye.
It's an aye.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay. Mark Raymond.
Aye.
Janae LeBlanc.
Aye.
Okay. Matt Choco.
Aye.
Ken Matz.
Aye.
Josh McHose.
Aye.
Luke Gunzer.
Aye.
Omar Crow will vote nay. Mike Seebeck.
No.
Curry Taylor.
Aye.
John Thompson.
Abstain.
Okay. And we will switch here for a moment. Madam Chair, if I didn't miss anyone.
You missed me, Mr. Secretary, unless you just already took it for granted I was voting for it, which I am.
Yes, I did miss you because I miss you here. Sorry, Star Child. How do you vote, Star Child?
Yes.
Yep, I didn't add you right there on that one sheet. Okay, that's a yes vote, which brings us to 9 in favor, 2 opposed, and 1 express abstention.
Okay, that amendment passes. Is there any further debate or amendment to the primary? I see Mr. Seebeck.
Muted. There we go. Sorry, I was muted. Move to strike everything after the word secession to the end of the sentence. Now I'd like to speak to that. Let the secretary catch up.
That's Charlie 40. Once again, point number 4455, 2000, Alphabet C 40.
Okay, I'm somewhat struggling here. I think it's questionable because this is something that we debated for nearly an hour as to whether we were going to add language that talked about requiring permission or not. But rather than having to go through records and to figure out who voted on which side, I'm going to allow it, but this is a very gray area. And I think we're really starting to tread into the area of being very, very dilatory here and going back over and over and over things that have already been decided by the committee. So I'm going
Chair, it
to
is
allow
not
it.
dilatory if I wasn't there for the debate. So I'm privileged to that information.
I'm going to allow it this time. I'm on one hand cautioning the committee and on the other hand begging the committee. We've spent an hour and a half on this already. I understand some people were not here, but we do need to also respect the time of the people who were. So please speak to your motion, Mr. Seebeck.
It's actually very simple. What right requires permission from anybody? None of them do. So this is redundant language. That's simple.
All right, would anyone else like to speak to this amendment, which is to strike everything after the word secession? Starchild.
Yeah, Mike, I respect your point. I think you're technically correct, but I think there's also the consideration that the right to secession, as most people understand it, is a right that would be exercised collectively. That is, that a group of people would normally be voting to secede. And I think a lot of people don't get that existing governments don't have a right to prevent that the US government can't just say, no, this is a perpetual union, the states have no right to exit. I think in the context of, without making our platform a lot more lengthy, which I'm personally not opposed to, but I don't know how much stomach, most libertarian delegates have for that. I think in the context which most people understand the language and the current political meaning of secession in the world, I think it's stronger having that language, even if it is technically a little bit redundant in terms of rights not requiring permission in any case. So I think we'd probably be better off at this juncture leaving that language in.
Thank you, Starchild. Mr. Ensor.
Yeah, I'd also like to say that on the surface, I agree with Mr. Seebeck's point that it would seemingly be redundant. The problem is it is not understood to be something that is that requires no permission from others, because whenever I see discussion of this come up, it always comes into the case of other people saying, well, you need permission to leave and stuff like that. So it's like, maybe it is redundant, but I think it's almost necessary just to hammer home and be explicit about exactly what we need just in the current environment and the foreseeable future of the environment.
Thank you, Mr. Ensor. We do have a visitor who raised their hand. Normally debate is limited to the committee, but I'm going to ask the committee if there's any objection to hearing from Scott Waguespack. Without objection, Scott, you can speak.
Yeah, sorry. I just got this notification like a few minutes ago, so I still don't really know what's going on. But I just wanted to say that, well, I agree that, yes, he's correct in saying that a right by definition should not require permission from everybody. Most common people who are going to be wind up reading this platform potentially aren't going to be that clearly thinking. I think in general, people tend to have a lot more fuzzy thinking about words like right, and that won't be understood. They will think things like, oh, it's a right, but it's a right that I need permission to, to exercise. So I don't think we should try that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wagisback. I'm sorry if I have mangled your last name. Mr. Seebeck.
If it please the crown, may I leave, may a colony leave the crown and form my own nation?
Okay.
Okay, is there any further debate or discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, I know, I can tell there is objection. So Mr. Secretary, when you are ready, we will do a roll call vote. What we are voting on is whether or not to strike all of the language after the word secession, which is striking dash a right which requires the permission of no currently established political entity. A yes vote would strike it. A no would leave it in the primary. Mr. Secretary.
Okay, give me 1 second. Just making a note here. I see Rachel Nix is here. All right, Gary Elfstead,
Name.
Mark Raymond,
Abstain.
Janae LeBlanc.
Nay.
Okay, Matt Choco,
Abstain.
Ken Matz,
Aye.
Josh McHose,
Nay.
Luke Enzer,
No.
Omar Recurl will abstain. Mike Seebeck,
Yes.
Star Child,
Nay.
Kurt Taylor,
Nay.
John Thompson.
Nay.
I heard a nay. All righty. Let me get this on the screen for everybody. If I didn't miss anyone, I don't think I did. Madam Chair, I show here 2 in favor, 7 opposed, and 3 express abstentions.
Okay, that amendment fails. We are back to the primary. And is there any further debate or amendment to the primary? Once Mr. Secretary can get that back on screen.
I gotta switch sheets. Okay, and here we go.
Mr. Seebeck.
Can we just get the language straight then if we're going to put this in there? Instead of saying requires the permission of no currently established whatever, that we could say that we're right, which does not require any permission of any established entity, and get the language correct.
I'm not sure what you're proposing. Could you perhaps put it in chat?
Yeah, I can do that, I think.
I think, Madam Chair,
Yes.
I think he's trying to just rework it so it's less clunky language.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, but I'm unclear as to what the reworking is, which is, and I'm sure the secretary is as well.
Okay, I can walk through it here.
Okay,
Okay. Where it says requires the permission, change the to no. And then where it says of no currently established, et cetera, change the no to any.
No to any.
That's
And
it.
the suggestion also change that of to from, perhaps.
We could do that. I think that's kind of either way. I'm okay with that. We can throw that in there too.
Which one was that?
Change the of to from after permission.
A right which requires no permission from any currently established political entity.
Yeah. Simply put, I think that makes it a little easier to read. That's got it. Although, shouldn't there be a period after entity too?
Yep.
Yeah. All right, that's what I was getting at, and the argument is it just makes it some easier to read.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further debate or discussion on these primarily grammatical changes?
Federal regulation requires all individuals.
Is there any objection to these changes? Okay, hearing none, those changes are adopted. Is there any further debate or amendment on the primary motion? Okay, seeing none, we're now going to move to debate or amendment of Mr. Brungart's substitute, which I'm going to give the secretary a moment to get up on screen. Okay, the substitute is now up on screen, and it is to add language to the original plank. That sentence we were working on, that's only part of the primary. So this is to add the words alter, abolish, or withdraw from it, and also the phrase or none, so that 3.7 would then read, whenever any form of government becomes destructive of individual liberty, it is the right of the people to alter, abolish, or withdraw from it, and to agree to such governance or none as to them shall seem most likely to protect their liberty.
You
Is
may
there-
have omitted the word new before governance.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did. That was a inadvertent. Is there any debate or discussion on this substitute?
Just to add the language in blue, is that correct?
And doesn't alter, comma, abolish already exists, right? We're actually just adding or withdraw from it and or none.
One moment, I believe you are correct.
No, that was the funny part about this.
Oh, it's alter or to abolish it. So yeah, it is changed now.
You see it?
Yeah, it is striking the phrase alter or abolish it, and instead inserting alter, abolish, or withdraw from it. And then adding or none after such new governance. Is there any debate or discussion on this? Now I'm going to, there might be a question that's raised in the mind of some committee members, because it certainly would be raised in mine if I were on the committee, because although this was offered as a substitute, and it is a proper substitute, the two really are not mutually exclusive. And if people were finding themselves in the position of liking both the language, the sentence we perfected, and these changes to the previous language, someone could move to amend the substitute to add the sentence we just perfected. I'm not suggesting we do that. I'm just saying, in case that question entered other people's minds, because these two really are not mutually exclusive. Mr. Cholko.
I'm not making this motion at this time. I just want to know, would it be in order for me to propose changing withdrawal to secede?
That would be in order, Mr. Choco.
Is there anybody else that wants to talk while I think about that?
I have Mr. Ensor, then Starchild, then Mr. Seebeck.
I was just going to make the motion that you spoke to, Madam Chair, about adding the edited sentence to the end of the substitute.
Okay, so what Mr. Ensor is proposing is at the end of the substitute motion to add the sentence, "We recognize the right to secession dash a right which requires no permission from any currently established political entity," which in effect is combining the two motions. And would you like to speak to that, Mr. Ensor?
Well, it's like you said, they're not mutually exclusive. And I think when it comes to this particular subject, the more clarification that we don't want to be overly cumbersome, but the more clarification we have, the better. And adding that last sentence, I don't think is unduly cumbersome. So I think it does improve it overall, and then combining them together makes it easier.
Thank you. Starchild?
Yeah, I was just, I agree with Luke and support this. I guess I just had a point of order or information as to whether that was necessary to combine them. I thought that if we just passed the first language or the language about we recognize the right, that would be automatically added to whatever we do to the first sentence.
No, those were two competing proposals. One was a substitute for the other. Without the motion to add it to the second one, if we, okay.
Okay, if it's necessary, then yeah, I support Luke's proposal to combine them.
Okay, I had Mr. Seebeck. Did you, when you first raised your hand, we were just initially on the substitute. Would you like to speak to the amendment to the substitute or on just the original substitute?
Actually, originally it was neither, but I have a point of parliamentary inquiry here.
Yes.
Does this motion to add this sentence effectively subsume the main into the substitute?
No, because there's additional altered language in the substitute that people may not like. And if the substitute is rejected, we are just back to plank 3.7 as originally worded with the additional sentence, rather than 3.7 as amended with the additional sentence.
Okay, thank you.
Had Mr. Brayman and then Mr. Thompson.
Yes, I'd like to speak against this amendment. The substitute motion had the advantage that, to me, was quite great, that it removed the word secession, which still is a buzzword which arouses very strong opinions. I think that this would feel to many people, including the word secession, as an attempt to relitigate the war between the states. I think it's safer and less obnoxious, frankly, to use the language that was proposed by Mr. Brungart originally, which says the same thing without using the buzzword that will cause a lot of people to have negative feelings about the Libertarian Party. That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson.
Yes, the person who raised, Mr. Baumgart, I think, raised this substitution originally. I believe that was the intent of his raising it, was to remove the secession language from the plank. So adding this to the substitution goes against, I believe, the spirit of the person who raised it, even though he's not here to speak to that himself. So I just felt that it was necessary to speak on his behalf in this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I had Starchild.
Yeah, Mark, I understand what you're getting at, but I think it is important to have the word secession specifically in there. I think some people will be looking for that. I don't think the word withdraw is synonymous with secession. I think withdraw is a lot vaguer, and it could be taken in many different ways. To withdraw from an existing government might just mean to, stop voting, stop engaging with it. It doesn't necessarily imply creating a new political jurisdiction. And I think that specifically is worth supporting. And the word secession is really the best, maybe the only word that we really have for that act. I think it is a word, therefore, that is worth fighting to reclaim and assert, rather than forever running away from it because of the war between the states that happened over a century ago. I think we can't allow ourselves to lose that important word in the political lexicon out of that fear. We need to reclaim it. We need to stand proudly behind it. And I think that's important. And so I don't favor avoiding that word and trying to take it out.
Thank you, Starchild. I had Mr. Ensor and then Mr. Ricuro. And yes, Mr. Thompson is correct about the why. Mr. Brungart introduced the substitute, but just a reminder to the committee that the committee, once something comes to the committee, it is in the committee's hands, and it's kind of like a jury. The committee's going to do what the committee's going to do, but ultimately the delegates will also have the option of striking things as well. We do not make the final decisions. I have Mr. Ensor, Mr. Ricuro, then Mr. Thompson. Mr. Ensor.
Yeah, I would like to just add on to what Starchild said. It is an important word, and it is something that is that accurately describes what we're going for. It's also a word that has been more and more talked about, and I've seen it being discussed even in more not like in less and less fringe areas, talking about what is needed in order to avoid a repeat of the war between the states. And as far as engendering dislike towards libertarians, the sad fact of the matter is a lot of people aren't going to like libertarians anyway. So we might as well say what we mean.
Thank you, Mr. Ensor. Mr. Ricuro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the point that was made earlier about the why, I think that's really a really important. I take that really seriously because Mr. Brunhart was representing his constituents, and it sounded like he had a lot of people in Michigan that were really concerned about some of the language. So, and I'm also really not a fan of, me personally, just combining things. I think there's a reason why you introduce a substitute. It's a different idea. There are pros and cons to it, and I'm sure many of us are probably, going a little crazy with these substitute motions and how we handle them. But as to Madam Chair's point, we're going to be pros by the time the committee is done with, when we're done with this term, as to how to handle substitute motions. So I would say that I'm rising in opposition to this because it was the original. There was a reason why it was introduced the way it was, and again, we made it worse, and that's something that's a baseline for me. Is when we make something worse, you're just not going to get my support for it. Thank you.
Mr. Thompson.
My hand was up on my head. Thank you.
Okay, is there any, Mr. Brayman? No, I think everyone's hands are now down. Is there any further debate or discussion on the amendment? Okay, Mr. Secretary, I know there's obviously objection, so we are going to be voting now on whether to add that perfected language from the primary. We recognize the right to secession, a right which requires no permission from any currently established political entity, to the substitute motion. When you can, Mr. Secretary, do a roll call vote.
Yes, Madam Chair. And here we go. Gary Alstead.
Abstain.
Okay, Mark Raymond.
Nay.
Janae LeBlanc.
Yay.
Okay. Matt Choco,
I think I'll, yay.
okay, Ken Matz,
Aye.
Josh McHose,
Aye.
Luke Enzer,
Aye.
Omar Crowe votes nay. Mike Seebeck,
Aye.
Star Child,
Yes.
Corey Taylor,
Aye.
John Thompson,
Nay.
and did I miss anyone? Alrighty. Madam Chair, I show 8 in favor, 3 opposed, and 1 express abstention.
Okay, thank you. That passes. Is there any further debate or amendment to the substitute as amended? Okay, I'm gonna just ask if there's any further debate or amendment to either the primary or the substitute before we move on to determining what shall be the main motion. Okay, seeing none, what we are going to be voting on now is shall the substitute motion as amended become the primary motion, or will the primary motion remain just the addition of that perfected sentence? So it shall the substitute become the main motion. A yes would then mean we would then be voting on whether or not to adopt the substitute. A no would mean we're back to the primary. And I think if someone proposes another substitute to the primary, I may need to violate the NAP. It's a joke. All right, Mr. Secretary, when you have the chance to take the roll.
I might back you up on that, Madam Chair. Alrighty, here we go. Gary Alstead, Mr. Alstead,
I'm gonna pass for now.
okay. Mark Raymond,
No.
Jenny LeBlanc,
Aye.
okay, Matt Choco,
Aye.
Ken Matz,
Aye.
Josh McHose,
Aye.
Luke Enzer,
Aye.
Omar Crowe votes nay. Mike Seebeck,
What are we voting on again? I got lost back there.
Whether or not the substitute shall become the main motion.
Where's the main motion?
it's on top.
The main motion is simply adding that sentence that we perfected to the existing language of 3.7. The substitute has changes to the language of 3.7 and
Okay.
adds that sentence.
Okay, now I got it. Aye.
Okay, Star Child.
Aye.
That was a nay.
Aye.
Aye, okay. Corey Taylor
Aye.
and John Thompson.
Nay.
Okay. We'll switch screens here. Is there anyone that I missed? Oh yeah, Gary Alstead.
Yeah, I'll vote nay.
Okay. All right, Madam Chair, I'm showing 8 in favor and 4 opposed and no express abstentions.
Okay, thank you. So the substitute as amended is now the main motion. It cannot be amended further except to add language. So if there is no addition of language, we are now going to proceed on whether or not to vote to make this the recommendation of the committee. I remind the committee, because I can see there are going to be some people happy and some people not happy, no matter which way this vote goes, that if it passes, there is always the opportunity for minority reports. Mr. Secretary, when you have a moment, if you could, not have a moment, when you are ready, if you would take the roll, and what we will be voting on is whether or not we will adopt the language on the screen, which would make 3.7 read as follows. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of individual liberty, it is the right of the people to alter, abolish, or withdraw from it, and to agree from such a new governance or none as to them shall seem most likely to protect their liberty. We recognize the right to secession, a right which requires no permission from any currently established political entity. A yes vote would adopt this language as the recommendation of the committee. A no vote would move us to would not adopt it, and we would go to the next agenda item. Mr. Secretary.
Minor point, Madam Chair, I think I heard you say agree from such new governance. It says on the screen, agree to such new governance. I assume that's what you meant, and either I misheard or you misspoke.
I think you misheard. I said to agree to such new governance.
Okay, I may have misheard then.
All right, I need a new sheet. Nope, number 7. Okay, here we go. Shall we adopt the proposal? Gary Elstead.
Aye.
Mark Raymond.
Nay.
Janae LeBlanc.
Aye.
And Matt Choco.
Aye.
Ken Matz.
Aye.
Josh McHose.
Aye.
Luke Enzer.
Aye.
Omar Crow votes nay. Mike Seebeck.
Abstain.
And Star Child.
Aye.
Curry Taylor.
Aye.
John Thompson.
Abstain.
Okay. Here we go. Madam Chair, I am showing here 8 in favor, 2 opposed, 2 express abstentions.
Okay, thank you. That passes as the recommendation of the committee. So we are moving to the next agenda item, which is the last consideration of proposals from the 2020 committee. We're moving on to proposal number 21, which is territorial autonomy. And there was a minority report on that, but what we are considering is the majority report. If the secretary could bring that up on screen.
Yeah, that would be 21, right?
Yes, sir.
Point of personal privilege.
Yes, Star Child.
Could we also have the minority report language on screen just for point of reference?
Yes, once I make it clear what the majority report was, I will ask the secretary to copy and paste the minority report on as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so the proposal of the majority from 2020 was to add a new plank to section 3 entitled territorial autonomy, which would read, we support self-determination for the territories of the United States. The federal government should accept the results of a referendum of each territory regarding preferences for statehood, independence, or to maintain their current status. For as long as the United States maintains territories, we support a constitutional amendment granting their full representation in the U.S. House of Representatives. That was the majority report. If the secretary could put up on screen the minority report for that, it is linked in a footnote to the agenda if you need to get that handy, Mr. Secretary.
I have the report. You're just gonna have to give me a moment to copy and paste it.
Now, certainly, I'm just going, thank you, baby Jesus in a manger that we got through the secession one.
Okay. Report coming. Just give me a moment here to do a little bit of copying and pasting because it is just, it doesn't copy over well.
Okay, this minority report is suggesting that we add a sentence to 3.7, an additional sentence, which is the plank we've just been doing a lot of work on amending that would say we support self-determination for the it's basically saying instead of a new plank that it would like us just to add it to 3.7. I remember now. I think where we end up placing this is going to be a separate question, that we need to perfect language first. So that is, the minority report didn't have different language, it just had a different placement. So we're going to right now talk about the language. And I had Mr. Seebeck, Mr. Cholko, and Mr. Alvstead. Mr. Seebeck.
Yeah, I have a motion to amend this.
Go ahead, Mr. Seebeck.
Okay, there are 3 places in the proposed language where it refers to either territories or territory, plural or singular. In all 3 of those cases, I wish to amend, I move to amend to add the words or possessions or possession, depending upon the tense, so that they would read territories or possessions in each case. And I'd like to speak to that separately.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that the secretary is clear that wherever it says territories, Mr. Seebeck wants to add after territories or possessions, and wherever it says territory, he would put or possession.
That's correct.
Go ahead and speak to it, Mr. Seebeck.
Politically, the federal government has both, and for the purposes of completeness, we need to address both. Very simple. We don't want to leave one of them hang out to dry.
Point of information, if I could maybe ask Chair as Mr. Seebeck to address this, which
Star Child, your points of information are not privileged. I did have Mr. Cholko and Mr. Alvstead. I will put you in line. Mr. Cholko, did you wish to speak to the amendment or stay in line for the primary?
I'll stay in line for the primary.
Okay, Mr. Alvstead.
I'll stay in line as well.
Okay, Star Child, you're now in order.
Mike, I wasn't aware of this distinction between territories and possessions. Which pieces of land or jurisdictions are specifically possessions and not territories, to your knowledge, controlled by the US government?
And just a note for the secretary, possessions should be plural each time territory is plural. So in the first instance and in the third instance. Okay, I just wanted to make sure you were clear on that. Okay, Mr. Seebeck, if you would like to answer Star Child's point of information.
Yes, I'm actually looking it up as we speak. However, I would point out that that has been a terminology which has been established in US law since our founding. The territories we have are Samoa, Guam, the Northern Marianas, Puerto Rico, and the US Virgin Islands, but there are other possessions we have. Example, Wake Island is one of them out in the Pacific, as an example. Possessions are legally distinct from territories under the law, which is why I say we need to include them for completeness.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Seebeck. Would anyone else like to speak to the amendment? Okay, I'm going to ask, is there any objection to the amendment?
A little word crafting, if I might. Assuming what Mike says is correct, I think that makes sense to mention possessions also. I think we can better say it, though. We support self-determination for territories and possessions of the United States.
So I think, are you suggesting everywhere it says or possession or possessions, it should say and?
No,
possession?
I think just for the first sentence. I think for the other two, it doesn't have the same grammar that makes it advisable to make it and.
I believe he's correct.
Okay, because I really don't think this is a substantive change, I'm going to ask the committee, is there any objection to treating the first instance where it says or as if it were Mr. Seebeck's original amendment? In other words, functionally treating it as a friendly amendment.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Ricuro.
I'll just say I passively object. I made this point before about having language ready. It gets a little difficult and kind of annoying, but I'm fine. I'm not formally objecting.
And I will note in this instance, it wasn't that Mr. Seebeck wasn't prepared. It was that Star Child raised a point that he hadn't considered. I think this is a little bit of a different situation than the types of situations we had found so frustrating in the past. Okay, now I'm going to ask, is there any objection to this amendment? The and possessions, or possession, or possessions, those three changes.
Madam Chair, there are hands up.
Those hands are waiting for when we get back to the, after this amendment is disposed of.
Okay, excellent.
Okay,
Well,
hearing, okay, Mr. Secretary.
I do object, but I'm reading the digital room, so I'm not going to object.
Okay, hearing no objection, then these amendments are adopted. We are back to the primary as amended. I have Mr. Cholko, Mr. Alvstead, and then Mr. Brayman. Mr. Cholko.
I would like to speak to it, but first I have a question. I just want to get clear on something that, you know, the minority report from 2020 that added language to 3.7, where we can't take any action on that at this time, right? We're just working on language, and if we wanted to say we're putting it on 3.7, we'd have to handle that separately. Is that correct?
Procedurally, I think that's the cleanest way to do it. Let's perfect the language, and then if someone wants to make a motion, once the language is perfected, that rather than this being a new plank, we add it to 3.7. Procedurally, it is cleaner to handle it that way.
So my only concern with that is that if it's going to be appended or added to an existing plank, that the language needs to be made to fit with that plank. And, you know, I don't know how we do that after, if we create the language and then want to add it later. Anyway, I don't want to do anything on that at this time. I just wanted to understand, you know, how that was going to work out.
And I'm going to give a little editorializing here that I remember doing in 2020. Adding this to 3.7 will make 3.7 very, very long and stylistically very different from the rest of the platform. I would suggest that anyone who wishes to do that and mess around with language to make it more stylistically fit, consider a minority report. And remember, we are on limited time, and to not major on the minors so much. I'm not saying that's what anyone's doing. I'm just giving some chairly advice, if it were. Mr. Cholko, did you have anything further?
Yeah, so I believe I supported this in 2020, and I think I support it now too. I have a little bit of a concern about calling out territories and possessions in particular, you know, saying we support self-determination for them. I mean, and that the federal government should accept the results of a referendum. I mean, I think the federal government should accept the results of a referendum for any state to secede, or any part of any state to secede, or any city to secede, or anything that wants to. So I'm a little bit uncomfortable with calling territories and possessions out separately, because I think it could be left to, you know, interpret that we don't support things like you know, entities leaving the United States. We obviously dealt with that in another plank, but you know, who knows what ends up passing into the platform. So I think I probably am going to vote for this, but I do have some concerns there, and I don't have a way to solve those concerns. But if anybody does, you know, let us know.
Thank you, Mr. Cholko. Mr. Alvstad.
Yeah, I want to speak against this plank. In general, I don't approve of adding more text to the platform unless it's something really important, and this just doesn't reach the bar. I think it has some real problems. I mean, we brought up this thing about territories, like what Wake Island has 100 people on it. We're really saying they should have their own congressman. I mean, it's just, I don't think it's a good plank. And I, even if it was a good plank, I don't think that it's important enough to add a new section to the platform.
Thank you, Mr. Brayman. Mr. Taylor?
My concern was somewhat similar to the preceding speaker. I think that one possible solution that I would like to offer is to amend this plank to remove the last sentence.
Is that the motion you are making at this time,
Yes,
Mr. Taylor?
I move to amend to remove the last sentence of this plank.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Taylor. So the amendment is
Mark-
to, excuse me,
Mr. Brandon.
Mr. Brayman, excuse me. I don't know how I got confused there. So I still have you on deck, Mr. Taylor, or no?
Yes, point of personal inquiry, I think.
Okay, okay.
If it's in order, I'm looking at the national platform right now, and I look through every plank, and the only place I can find in the platform which has a carriage, it has a paragraph, starting a new paragraph, is in the preamble and in the statement of principles. Is the only place I could find that actually has multiple paragraphs. Is it in order for us to make multiple paragraphs inside of a platform plank?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so Mr. Brayman's amendment is to strike the last sentence of this, which would be to strike the language. If you could get that back up on the screen, I somehow lost your screen.
Madam Chair, the Secretary said he had to drop for a moment in the chat.
Oh, okay. All right, well then I will handle it from here. One moment, I need to pull up the language. So Mr. Brayman's amendment, one moment, is to strike the sentence, "For as long as the United States maintains territories, we support a constitutional amendment granting their full representation in the U.S. House of Representatives."
May I speak to that?
Yes, you can.
So the point was brought up that Wake Island as a possession has only 150 people. I verified that just by looking up its population. American Samoa, which is somewhat larger, is still only 55,000 people, which would be 10 times smaller than Wyoming, the smallest state that currently has one representative in Congress. I think this language was probably put in to support the idea that Puerto Rico should immediately be given a representative in Congress. But Puerto Rico is one of the very few territories or possessions that has a population larger than a number of states. I think it's dangerous to put in this language, and we will be laughed at if we put this in.
Madam Chair, return. I apologize, everyone. I lost my connection. I had to move.
Okay, I will stop my chair, my share. Where we are at is Mr. Brayman was moving to strike the sentence, "For as long as the United States maintains territories, we support a constitutional amendment granting their full representation in the U.S. House of Representatives." I had Starchild and then Mr. Cholko. Starchild.
Yeah, I think you know, the objections Mark makes are valid. I think I'm also confused whether the District of Columbia would be considered as a territory, a possession, or something else in terms of technical legal status. You know, whether we want to call for some kind of representation or not. I'm kind of agnostic on you know what status each of these places should have at this point in the current existing legal structure of the United States. But I put some language in chat which I think we might consider as substitute for that whole paragraph. The chat isn't up right now, so I can't wait just a second. I closed it myself, apologies. I'm suggesting maybe we consider language, people living in the territories and possessions of the, or people living in the territories or possessions of the United States have the same rights as residents of the states, including the rights to self-determination and secession. That might kind of be a way to get around some of this, but I'm open to other suggestions. In general, I think more detail is good if we can come up with a good detailed plan to address the status of some of these places. I think that would be desirable, but getting some background noise.
Well, because I wasn't sure if you were finished, and I was going to recognize Mr. Choco, but I was going to remind everyone to try to keep debate on the amendment. It was related, but it was starting to go a bit astray, Star Child.
Yeah, I understand that. I guess for the amendment, I'm not opposed to it, but I don't think it really solves the problem. I'd like to, keep that other option in mind for when we get to a place that would be appropriate to consider that approach.
Mr. Choco.
Thank you. Yeah. So I'll say this. I don't want to go out of turn here, but I think that we can do better than the language that's being proposed to be eliminated here. So I think I do support getting this language out of here. I'll just say that I certainly think that those 150 people on Wake Island deserve representation the same as anybody else. I obviously don't think that 150 person group should get their own representative in the US House, because that wouldn't give them the same representation as the rest of us. It would give them a whole hell of a lot more. So the language that we have here that Mark is talking about eliminating is kind of confusing. It could be construed to say that we support giving tiny territories a representative of their own in Congress, though I don't think that's what the intention was when we proposed this language in 2020. So I'm gonna go ahead and support the amendment and probably then try to get some different language in here, like what Star Child just mentioned.
Okay, I'm going to have a few words for the committee after we dispose of this amendment, because it's not directly on point on the amendment. Is there any further debate or discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, is there any objection to adopting the amendment? Okay, seeing none, the amendment is adopted and that sentence is struck. Okay, the bit of guidance I had wanted to offer, not to alarm the committee and not to say I have a crystal ball, but I think a lot of us who've been paying a lot of attention to what's going on nationally may see that the first day of convention may be taken up by a lot of credentialing issues. The chance that we're going to have another situation where our report is going to be truncated or perhaps not even heard at all is not out of the realm of possibility. I would ask us to consider really carefully to prioritize what it is that we want to pass, that if we have to make a plea to the convention in order to hear things out of order or go back and forth with the bylaws committee or any other kind of negotiations that I can do to make sure our voices get heard, my bargaining power will be a lot stronger if we're not coming at the convention with 21 proposals. I'm not saying that's how many we have. I am just really cautioning us to conservatism in picking the best of the best. However, the committee can bring 100 proposals if it so wishes. I can only give you my advice and guidance in my experience. So we are now back to the main motion, which is proposal number 21 of the original 2020 report. with the last sentence struck. Would anyone like to speak to that further or amend it further? It looks like we lost the secretary again. I'm going to put my screen back up. Mr. Cholko.
So yeah, never mind. I was gonna make that Star Child language amendment, but in light of what you said, and I'm thinking about it now, I think it's probably better to just leave this one alone. Keep it as clean as we can in the event that we ever do get to it at convention. So I'm doing nothing.
Okay, would Star Child?
I'm listening to you, Matt, and I guess I'm unclear that what I was suggesting would make things any longer. I'm interested in hearing the argument as to why it would be cleaner to leave it alone.
Okay, I'm going to be, I'll let Mr. Cholko speak, but I think maybe I was a bit too circumspect. I'm stepping outside of my neutrality a little bit. My recommendation to the committee, take it or leave it, is to postpone this indefinitely and concentrate on the proposals we already have and perhaps even consider eliminating some of them. The chances of us getting to this, and do we really think this is at the top of our priority list after 2 years we just had of COVID? The committee can make that decision. I'm telling you my recommendation as chair. From my experience, this is my third term as committee chair. I've been to this rodeo and I'm not known as the platform whisperer amongst the National Party for nothing. But I'm leaving it up to the committee. Mr. Cholko, if you would like to answer Star Child's point.
Yeah, so I just think that the language that you see on the screen right now in blue, pretty straightforward and simple. I like Star Child's proposed language. I just think that you know, in the event that this ever does come up, you know, I think keeping it short and to the point like it is right there, there's not really anything there that any libertarian's going to agree with. Maybe there's not in the Star Child language either. I just don't see the need to add that stuff on at this time, or I don't see a big need to add anything beyond the blue text. So that's why I didn't do it. I was originally thinking to propose your language, Star Child, and then I just decided it's maybe not worth it.
If I could just ask a follow-up question.
Yes, Star Child.
Then Matt, are you suggesting that blue language should be a standalone amendment, or that it should be added to the 3.7 amendment on secession and so forth that we just passed?
Well, I wasn't making a suggestion at this time, although in 2020, as Omar mentioned a minute ago, I signed on to the minority report that appended that language to 3.7 or whatever it was. So I think I support that at this time too, but that's not what I'm thinking about at this moment. It's not what I'm talking about anyway at this moment.
Okay, I guess sort of my point was that it seemed like to me similar enough to the subject of 3.7 that we'd want to incorporate it into that plank. I thought my proposed language might work a little bit better than the language in blue for that purpose, but I think the language in blue I'm not really opposed to either. I would just suggest we again add the word accordingly at the beginning and tack it on to the end of that plank so that it kind of segues a little better.
Star Child, just a second, point of personal privilege. Madam Chair, I'm getting a lot of feedback from your microphone, and it's very difficult to hear Star Child's comments.
Okay, one moment. It's because I'm trying to handle the secretarial thing. Okay, I will be muting. So Star Child, are you making that motion at this point?
Yeah, I will if it's in order to add the word accordingly at the beginning of the blue language and a comma, and then as the rest of language stands, and tacking that on to the end of the 3.7 plank. It just seems conducive to the language in that plank and maybe too short to warrant creating a separate freestanding plank about territories and statehood and so on.
Okay, so the amendment that Starchild is proposing is to add the word accordingly, comma, and then continuing with we support and moving this entire 2 sentences up to the end of 3.7 after the language we just amended in the previous agenda item. Is that correct, Starchild?
Yes. And I'm not firmly set on this, so I'm open to debate if people think it's a bad idea to hear those reasons. This is sort of my intuitive feeling about it at this point, but there may be other considerations I haven't thought of.
Okay, Mr. Cholko.
So yeah, I think that's a good idea, and essentially it ties back into what the chair just mentioned a minute ago. By the numbers, if we do this, it'll reduce our, it'll take one proposal out of our, if we put this on 3.7 rather than having it as a standalone, it takes the number of proposals in our report down by 1, which is helpful if we run out of time or at convention. So I think there's some value in that, and I do think it fits very well there. So even if you take that factor out of it, I think it makes sense to put it on 3.7. Exactly the way Starchild just mentioned with the word accordingly at the beginning. I like that.
Mr. Cholko, just as a point of information, it would not reduce the proposals. Adding this to 3.7 as it is passed today, if it passes, would still be a separate proposal, though we could, when we are preparing our report, move to combine them. It does open up the possibility of combining them, but passing this would not do that automatically.
Understood. Well, like I said, even without that factor, I still support it. So,
okay, Mr. Secretary.
Yes, Madam Chair. I'm sorry. I've had a few lapses of internet, but I think I'm stable now. I just want to, for as a point of information, where are we? I know that we were at the Bremen that was adopted without objection. So accordingly should be at the front. Like, just help me out here because I want to make a motion, but first I want this to be clear on the screen for everybody.
Certainly, and let me stop my share. Starchild had moved to amend to add the word accordingly to the very beginning of that. And instead of it being a standalone plank, these 2 sentences be added to 3.7, to the end of 3.7.
So we're just adding accordingly.
And moving it to the end of 3.7.
And moving to the end of 3.7. Okay. My motion is I move to postpone indefinitely.
Okay, I'm going to need to look something up. I don't think you can do that until we're on the main motion. I don't think you can do it while we're in an amendment phase. I think we have to dispose of the amendment first, but let me double check that. But I think it'd be quicker if we just dispose of the amendment and then I will call upon you for that motion. Would that be agreeable to you, Mr. Secretary?
Well, we've got about 20 minutes left, so it's going to end up, I think, the same way. So yeah, sure. 7.
Is postponing indefinitely the amendment is still going to leave us with the primary motion. And I think your objective is to this whole subject to be postponed indefinitely. So I don't think you want to be moving a postpone indefinitely at this point, that you want to get to. Okay, so would you object then for me putting you first in line after we dispose of the amendment?
Yeah, sure. I'll keep my hand up, I guess.
Thank you. So we are on the Star Child amendment, which is to add the word accordingly and to move this to the end of 3.7. Is there any further debate or amendment? Hearing none, is there any objection to the amendment? Hearing none, the amendment is adopted. Mr. Ricuro, now you are in order to make your motion.
I move to postpone indefinitely, Madam Chair.
Okay, we have now, and why do I always forget whether that is debatable or not? I believe it is.
Yeah, we debated it last
Yeah.
meeting, which surprised me and you.
Yeah, I was both like, that seems to defeat the purpose. Oh, okay, and I believe debate can go into the merits of the main question. So please speak to your motion.
You laid it out really well, Madam Chair. We've exhausted a lot of time on this, and this was adopted by an 8-7 vote last term. So if it was controversial last term, it's a new committee. It's still controversial with a new committee. Let's just go back to the drawing board and work on things that we can accomplish. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Choco.
So I oppose the motion to postpone indefinitely at this time. I think if we vote this motion down, we're about to vote on this on this proposal right now. We either do it or we don't. But I think in the time that we're debating this, we could have just voted on this thing and disposed of it that way. So I oppose. Let's just finish our work that we started here.
Thank you, Mr. Choco. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion to postpone indefinitely? And I am taking it that Mr. Starchild.
I'll just say what I just said in chat, which is that I'm amenable to postponing just because the second sentence here remains problematic. I don't think we actually want the feds to accept the results of Wake Island's 150 people preferring statehood. If that was their preference, for example, that would automatically give them a representative in the House, which we discussed a few minutes ago, and people seem to agree was not desirable. I think, though, that fixing that and figuring out exactly what we want to say about the status of Wake Island and the District of Columbia and Mariana Islands and all the rest of them could take a lot of time. I think it is a worthy thing to spend time on, but maybe there's other things that we could get through in a shorter amount of time right now. So I'm amenable to postponing this item, unless there's some good reason not to.
Okay, would anyone else like to speak to the motion to postpone indefinitely? And Mr. Choco, I'm assuming you are going to object.
No, I'm not going to object anymore. I realize now people want to work on it. So no, I don't object.
Okay, is there any objection to postponing this indefinitely? Hearing none, this item is postponed.
Just one moment. I meant to say something.
Oh,
I didn't
okay,
realize I was hitting the clap hands instead of raise hand. So as to us talking about territories or any type of jurisdiction asking for admittance to the union, when DC had been doing that, they had been asking for strictly a senator, not a U.S. House of Representative, if I remember correctly, because that would put them on equal footing with all of the rest of the states, but they would not get a U.S. House rep because they do not have 60,000. Well, they would, but it's a requirement to have 60,000 people in your jurisdiction to have a U.S. House of Representatives the representative. So that would be the information I guess most people are looking for in this regard.
Okay, thank you. I am back.
That's what I
to-
meant though, is that they would get one. I meant the opposite. Yeah. Okay.
We have pretty much though ended the debate on this. What we are asking, we're moving to a vote, and I'm asking if there's any objection to postponing
Nope.
this indefinitely by the committee. And I don't see any objection to postponing this indefinitely. So this item has been postponed indefinitely. And is the secretary back?
Federal regulation requires all individuals.
I'm here.
Here.
Okay,
Thank
we
you.
have a few moments left, so we are moving to the motion to reconsider now. The next item on the agenda is reconsideration of the proposal on creating a new plank on gender autonomy. What was passed by the committee was a new plank in section 1 entitled Gender Autonomy, which would read, individuals have the sole authority to determine and express their own gender identities. We are going to move and debate, and we can debate whether or not to reconsider, and the debate can go into the main, into the main question. If we do vote yes to reconsider, it's as if it's before the committee again. And Mr. Ricuro has indicated that he will be moving a substitute if we do reconsider it. And this is to add language which was put into the agenda, to add language into section 1.4. I wanted to make sure that the secretary understood that the only language I put into 1.4 out of his proposal were the ones that had to do directly with reconsideration of this question, and that the additional striking that he would wish to do went beyond reconsideration of this question, would need to be done as a separate proposal and a different agenda item. But where we are at right now is debate and potentially a vote on whether or not we are going to reconsider the addition of the new plank as I had read. Would anyone like to speak to that?
I guess I'll go, Madam Chair.
Okay, Mr. Secretary.
So when we passed this, obviously there was a lot of debate about this, and it's going to be its own plank, and that sometimes can be a slippery slope. Whereas I had made a promise that I would propose some new languages in the on the email list. It got just a little bit of support, so I'm hoping that we'll reconsider this, and yeah, that we'll reconsider this, because we can put the language somewhere else, and we could also even consider more things. But I think there was more work to be done with this. It's good. I think we can make it better. So please reconsider. Thank you.
Mr. Taylor, and then Starchild.
Yeah, I'm going to probably vote no on reconsidering. And the reason is because I feel this topic is important enough to be its own platform plank. And it's, as far as length goes, it's the same length, same number of words. The only thing that's added is the title. I think that that's important as well. So I'm going to vote no on reconsideration.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Starchild.
Omar, I am unclear. You're proposing to reconsider basically just to open the door to whatever other changes people might want to make, or did you have a specific alternative that you're proposing here?
Starchild, I will answer that as a point of information. The alternative that he said he would move as a substitute if we are to reconsider this has been in the agenda. The language is in the agenda.
Oh, okay. Perhaps the secretary could put it up on screen.
Point of information.
Yes.
So if we move to reconsider, then that we could do anything we want with this plank at that time, is that right?
Yes, it will be as if it got proposed brand new.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, Zelma.
Yes, Mr. Secretary.
So Star Child had asked to put the language on the screen, and I did, but then I thought that might be premature because we're just considering reconsideration. So I'm awaiting instruction by you because I don't want to seem as if I'm tilting something one way or another.
No, it's in order to say what you would move as part of your argument to reconsider. So it is perfectly appropriate to put the language that I included in the agenda, which was more narrow than what you had put on the list,
Right.
on the screen.
Okay, so I'll copy that text from the agenda and solely that text onto the screen in just a moment here. I had it and then I took it off. I'll put it back on.
And a point of personal privilege, if I might.
Yes,
I'd like to see the titles or proposed titles for both the current and the proposed language on these planks as well.
Okay, the title that he would be proposing is up on the screen, to amend 1.4 to include this. And the title for the new plank was gender autonomy.
So 1.4 was gender autonomy. That was the title you're saying, Madam Chair? I'm not looking at the platform right now because it's.
It would be helpful if everyone, I'm going to ask in the future, has a copy of the agenda in front of them to not only rely upon the secretary on the screen. What had been passed previously as the new plank was entitled gender autonomy.
Okay.
What the secretary had said he would be proposing, if we vote to reconsider, is a substitution in which the current plank 1.4 personal relationships would be amended, including the title, to add and expression. So it would be 1.4 personal relationships and expression.
I've just been concerned about having too many windows open and stuff. Sometimes I have computer issues as it is with Zoom and everything.
Has your question been answered?
I'm still waiting. I think he's still putting stuff up on the screen. So
No,
I
this is the agenda.
So just to be clear, because again, I'm not looking at the platform, I'm just looking at what's on screen. The current platform proposal plank would be gender autonomy. But what the current platform says personal relationships. And so this would be, instead of having that new plank called gender autonomy, this would change the existing one to personal relationships and expression with the language added in blue.
Precisely.
Okay, let me think about that.
Would anyone else like to speak to the motion to reconsider?
One more point of information, Madam Chair.
Yes, Starchild.
If I heard you answer the question, I think so. Maybe I know the answers, but I just want to make absolutely sure if there's another way to do it. Would it be possible to reconsider strictly for the purpose of considering this change, or can we only reconsider if we also open the door to any other potential changes?
No, reconsidering it would open the door to everything, including voting it all down.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
as if considering it anew.
Okay, that's what I was afraid of. Yeah. All right.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes, we've already discussed this plank kind of ad nauseum. At this point in our schedule with the items that we have to cover, I strongly advise against reconsidering this at this time.
Thank you.
I can agree.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Would anyone else like to speak to reconsideration? Star Child, your hand was raised.
It was for before, but I agree with what John's saying. I feel like going into the whole thing again would be too much. I don't like this enough. I mean, I kind of like it, but I don't like it enough to risk that.
Okay, my controls are somewhat limited right now. I did something weird with my screens. If you could please lower your hand. Would anyone else like to speak to reconsider? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Secretary, if you could please do a roll call vote on the motion to reconsider.
Yes. Can you hear me well, Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
Okay, here we go. Gary Alstead.
He had stepped away. He didn't mention me if he was coming back, so.
Oh, okay. Madam Chair, quick point of information. Could you explain to everybody what a yes vote and a nay vote means?
Okay, one moment, let me let this announcement go by. Okay, a yes vote would mean that we are considering the gender autonomy plank anew, as if it were proposed for the first time, at which point Mr. Secretary had indicated that he would be first in line to offer a substitute. A no vote would leave things as they are, with a new plank being passed as the proposal of this committee, as it was previously passed. Is everyone clear?
Okay. So if Gary's not there, I'm gonna call upon you first. So Rachel Nix.
Real quick, am I allowed to vote on this if I voted nay on the original?
Yes, this is, everyone gets to vote.
Okay, then yes.
Mark Raymond.
Yes.
Janae LeBlanc.
Nay.
Matt Choco.
Pass.
Ken Matz.
Aye.
Josh McHose.
Aye.
Luke Enzer.
Abstain.
Omar Crow will vote aye. Mike Seebeck.
Abstain.
Okay, Star Child.
I think I'm going to vote to abstain too. I'm inclined to want to table because anyway, yeah.
Curry Taylor.
No.
John Thompson.
Hey,
Okay, let me get this on screen for you, Madam Chair. I know we passed somebody. Matt Choco.
I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Madam Chair, I show 5 in favor, 3 opposed, 4 express abstentions.
Okay, so the motion to reconsider has passed. We are coming up against our time limit here, but I did say that I would recognize if the motion to reconsider passed, Mr. Secretary first to make his motion to substitute. After he makes his motion to substitute, I think that would be a good stopping point. And that is where we would take up at the next committee meeting, if you wish to make that motion, Mr. Secretary.
Yes, so let me put up the entire text of what my substitute motion is, and then obviously we can get, talk about it some more, I guess, on the list if need be. Let me get this correct for everybody to see. Okay, Madam Chair.
Okay, so that is your motion to substitute for the original, which was addition of a new plank with the language I had previously read. We are coming up upon our time for adjournment. I do see Star Child has his hand raised. Star Child.
I was going to vote to table, but if we're going to, adjourn after this anyway, then we don't really need to. We can discuss it on email, which is kind of what I was hoping to do. I'll just add that, I think it's important to have that language in there. That's why I was loath to reconsider and open it up to possible deletion. But I think it seems like there's a majority on the committee that does want something strong in here about gender identity and self-expression. And it might actually increase our chances of getting this language added to the platform if we do put it in the context of a longer plank that has other stuff in it that people want. Putting it into 1.4 as Omar is proposing, and this would mirror what I was suggesting for the language on secession and adding territories and such to that rather than having a freestanding separate plank on it. So I hope we work on perfecting Omar's language perhaps on email. I see you could possibly use some wordsmithing, but overall I think it's it looks like a good approach to me.
Okay, so we are coming up on our time for adjournment. So I would suggest that everyone discuss both the original and the substitute on email list. If there's going to be amendments to, workshop the language so that we could get through this fairly quickly next meeting, as we have spent considerable time on this already. So our next meeting is next Thursday at 9 o'clock Eastern. And with that, unless there's any further motions, we are going to be adjourned. Is there any objection to adjourning at this time? Okay, hearing none, I will see you all next week, next Thursday at 9 o'clock. And please look ahead to the other reconsider that will be on the agenda that was on this agenda. And if there's any agreements or languages that can be worked out ahead of time, that will speed up our meetings considerably. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you have an awesome night.
Hey, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
I would ask if the chair or secretary, whichever is appropriate, would post the in a specific email, headline next meeting or something like that in caps, and make it obvious with the call-in information as well as the Zoom login information, just to make it easier. Again, and the chair and I had discussed this, but oops, I'll wait for the announcement.
Law enforcement officer or TSA.
I'd just like to see the actual meeting information in an email and not have to go through an additional step of waiting for an email from Zoom. I don't give them my actual email address when I register with Zoom, just because I don't think it's any of their business. I don't want to be on their spam list or whatever. So I would just request that for getting the information out there for the next meeting. Also, it's easier to share that with others who might be interested in attending our meeting.
As I had said before, and I know this will not be popular, Star Child, but absent a motion from the committee, I do not intend upon changing the current practice. We've had absolutely no spammers. I do not know why the registration makes it less likely, but I have been to a gazillion meetings lately, and this is the only one in which registration has been used, and it's the only one that has not had interruptions. And absent an order from this committee for me to conduct things otherwise, I am going to continue my current practice, but I will register on your behalf and email you the login information as I did for this meeting. So you will not be required to give up your personal email address.
I appreciate you doing that as a personal favor, Madam Chair, but I do think it also interferes with participation and transparency to do it this way. I'm interested in exploring other possibilities, like being able to kick out anybody who is spamming us or anything like that. Should it occur, I think it may just be coincidence. I don't see how registration is really stopping anybody who wanted to come in here and spam or whatever. So I would request the agenda for next meeting include this issue so we can at least discuss and vote on it if you don't want to unilaterally just put the information out there for people.
Star Chat, I would suggest that you see if perhaps you can get sponsors for an email ballot for that. Otherwise, I can add it to the agenda. But again, absent an order of this committee, I do not intend upon changing the practice.
Yeah, please put it on the agenda, because email ballot could take longer than before the next meeting anyway. So if we can discuss on email, that would be great too. But as a backup, I'd like to agenda it if I might.
Okay, I will do that. And
thank you.
With that, we are adjourned at it's 9:04, so it's 11:04 Eastern, and I will see you guys next week. I hope you have an awesome week.
Thanks,
everybody.
Chair.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.